Yo, what is up everybody? Welcome back to the channel for a brand new video and the first installment of a brand new series here on the channel. So in this new series, I'm going to be going through every single team in the CDL as we approach the Vanguard season and breaking down the team, the roster construction, how I think they're going to perform as we approach next year. So I'm really excited for this series. I hope you are too. Today we're going to be starting with the New York Subliners because this is a team that has a lot of hype coming into the season, rightfully so. They made a lot of big roster moves this offseason and they are set and in a very good spot to be, in my opinion, a championship contending team for Vanguard. So I'm excited to talk about them and the other 11 CDL teams as we approach the season. If you enjoy this video and this new series idea, let me know by leaving a like down below, and certainly leave a comment as well with your thoughts on the video and the series and what team you might want to see me break down next. And also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss these videos and other videos like this one from me in the future. Your support on these videos is so helpful to me and it really means a lot to me, so I thank you for all that. I hope you enjoy the video, and let's hop right into it. So as I'm recording this, the screen there is blank. I'm not seeing anything, but I'm just going to slap up some New York Subliners highlights from Vanguard kickoff tournaments, stuff like that to have on in the background as we talk. So I'm going to start off, well actually I should start off with the roster. If you don't know somehow, if you somehow missed it, the roster for New York is Clayster, Crim6, Hydra, and Neptune. So I mean right there, you know that team's getting a lot of hype and for good reason. Now even though Cold War is behind us, it's over with, it's not super relevant to the Vanguard season. Just to touch on how these guys did in Cold War, because that is the most season of COD we have, so it is the best gauge really of how we can expect these guys to perform. Again, though, even though the game is definitely different. Anyway, we have the list over from Breaking Point. They compiled a list of coaches, amateur coaches, maybe some players, content creators, media, all of this to vote on the top 20 players from Cold War. I was lucky enough to be able to vote myself, and my list, I'll give you my list and their list. So on their list, all three of the four players on New York came in the top 20. They had Neptune at number 19, Clayster at number 17, and Hydra at number 10. I would comfortably assume Crim6 probably just missed the cut. Now on my list, I actually did have Crim6 in the top 20, just barely. So I actually had Neptune at 22, Clayster at 21, Crim6 at 20, and Hydra also at 10, just like Breaking Point. So, I was pretty close. I was a little lower, I guess, on Clay and Neptune, but not by a whole lot, I think looking back at my list, I probably could have had them a bit higher, but definitely that that high teens, low 20 range, I think makes sense for those guys. But anyway, I mean, Hydra definitely a top 10 player. I think as we approach Vanguard, he's going to have a great year. Neptune, I'm looking at him as a guy who could really have a standout year. I'm probably going to do a video where I break down players who I think are like breakout candidates to have a really truly breakthrough season. And I think Neptune's probably going to be the top of that list because he is incredible. And then of course Clayster and Crim6, I always struggle with saying those two words back to back. We know what you're going to get from them. They're not going to be the guys anymore who go out and they put up crazy numbers. On occasion they will, but they're going to be the guys who do whatever it takes to win. We just know that's how they are by now. They won't put up the best numbers, but they will put their team in positions to win as often as possible. So it makes for a good dynamic. You have the two SMG players who are just uber talented. You want them to be getting as many engagements as possible and just going out there and taking over maps. And the two AR players, sort of the strategy, the communications, and also, I mean, they're still good players. Like, it's not they're garbage. I think they're top 20 players, or close to top 20 players. So they're still good players. Now, I will say on the individual level, I think the biggest X factor for New York this year is probably Neptune. And here's why. Hydra, I think we know what we're going to get. Now, that could be risky to, say Hydra is definitely going to be a top 8 to 10 player because he was only a rookie last year. So he does not have a track record of 3-4 COD titles in a row where he's been a top player. However, it was clear watching last year. I mean, I think it's safe to say this guy's going to be a star. I mean, he already is a star. So I'm not too worried about crowning him as this team's star player. I think that's a safe assumption to make. I just think he has the skills. He's looked phenomenal so far in Vanguard. His communication's getting better. He's learning English. He's a very good English speaker now. So all of that definitely, in my opinion, has Hydra trending in the right direction towards being this team's star. Clayster and Crim6, like I was saying, we know what you're going to get from them. I mean, they've been doing it for, a decade now. So, at this point, like I said, they're not going to put up the big numbers, but they are going to make the right plays. They're going to be able to coach this team up in-game, make sure communication is on point. That's also very important for a team with Hydra because, like I said, the language barrier, while it's diminishing, is still there in some situations. So it's good to have two communicators as good as Clay and Crim6 there to sort of ease the gap and make those comms a little bit easier. But then Neptune, it's hard to say because he's not like Hydra. I mean, he's closer to Hydra than he is to Clay and Crim. He's not the savvy, veteran, smart player, but he's also not, in my opinion, quite as talented as Hydra, or at least he didn't show that last year. Well, I do think he's very talented, and just like if you just looked at raw skill, he might even be higher than Hydra. I mean, his movement is probably top 2 in the game, right up there with Shotzi. His movement's incredible, It's just that the consistency last year was not there for Neptune. That's the big thing for me. It's hard to rely on a guy where, him and Hydra are both rookies, so it's not like they both have long track records. But Hydra was consistently, for the most part, great last year, whereas Neptune had times where he was great and times where he was not great. But I do think he will be alleviated some here by the situation he's being put into, because he has talked about it on stream, wherever else. Other people have talked about it too. Florida was not really a great situation last year. The communications were not great. The roles on the team were kind of weird. It was not a very well structured environment. And a player like Neptune, who is kind of that guy who he just goes out there and he plays, it's a tough role for him to succeed in, because he has to sort of prioritize playing a little bit differently to succeed with those teammates. Whereas Clay and Krim, it's not going to be that way. He'll be able to do what he wants, and they're going to make sure he's still playing the game smart. So, I say he can do what he wants. He's going to have to play in the New York system, but I think Clay and Krim will be able to adapt the way they play to fit alongside Neptune and Hydra. They know, let these young guys take over, and they can just be the guys behind the scenes, like I said, doing the strats, the coaching, the talking, all of that. So I think Neptune's in a great spot to succeed here. He is definitely, though, my X factor on an individual level, because like I said, we just don't quite know what we're going to get from him, but I do think he's set up in a much better spot to be a great player for this team, and I think he has potential, really, in my opinion, to be a top 10 to 15 player this year in Vanguard. We'll see. The jury's obviously still out. The game didn't even start yet from the competitive season, but he certainly looks great in the tournament so far, awesome at search, and I think he's definitely has breakout potential this year. So I talked for a while there about the individuals, probably a little longer than I wanted to, but now let's move over to the team and where I expect this team to be as a collective unit for the Vanguard season. I almost said Cold War. As a team, I think this team's in an interesting spot where I think, if I had to guess right now, we don't even know what the third game mode is, so that obviously matters. It's probably going to be controlled, but we don't know for sure. We don't know maps. We don't know what weapons are going to be GA'd, all of that. However, this team to me seems like a team who kind of will be good at all three game modes, but I don't know if I would call them elite at any game mode. Now, there's a reason behind that, of course, and I definitely think, just looking at the individuals alone, plus combined with the wisdom of some of the players on the team, I think that comfortably makes them good at every mode. But to break it down further, I think in Search, it probably, in my mind right now, could probably be their strongest game mode. However, there's also pretty much every team, not every team, but there's a lot of teams in the league where I think Search is their strong suit. So, of course, somebody has to lose every time you play Search. So even though they might be, any other time an elite Search team, they're also going to have elite Search competition. Looking at the players, Neptune, in my mind, he might be their best Search player, which is obviously a bold statement given the team around him. But he's just the typical, he played Halo, Search kid now in the league, and he's just phenomenal at Search. I love watching him play Search. His POV is so fun to watch at any time, but especially in Search. And then Hydra, kind of the same way. I think last year Hardpoint was probably Hydra's best game mode, but Search was not too far behind. He was very good at both of those modes. And then Clayster and Crim 6, that's just, where do the best minds take over the most? They take over in Search. So no worries about this team in Search with their strategies or their shot calling. They certainly have the talent and the smarts to be a good Search team. Now looking at respawns, I think they could struggle a little bit, in my opinion, with slaying. And again, it just comes down to that consistency, where we'll have to see it more consistently from Neptune, because he can have his good games, he can have his bad games, but he's going to need to be a little more consistent for this team. And then Clay and Krim, while everything they bring to the table with their intangibles and all that certainly cannot be understated, and I think so far this video I've done a good job of not understating that. I've given a lot of credit to how good they are as smart players and as, strategists. They are not top-tier slayers anymore, in my opinion, at least not consistently. Like I said, they can definitely pop off, don't get me wrong. I think Clay had the most kills in any map last year with 43 in a raid control, so they certainly can pop off, but they're not going to be those guys that are going to take over games consistently for you. And in respawns, that worries me, because I know you don't have to be the best slaying team to win respawns. However, it's something like 90% of the time the team who gets the most kills wins the respawn maps. And that's what it boils down to. Now, KD is not everything, but it is, as a team, it is a very important statistic when it comes to respawns. Now, this team, to me, sort of has a vibe of maybe like Toronto or Minnesota from last year, a team that might be able to, when they get outslayed in respawns, have a better chance of winning compared to most teams, because they should be able to play smarter and put themselves in situations where you don't have to get all the kills, you just have to get the right kills, and that is what can push you over the finish line and win some close maps when it comes to hard points and controls. So I can definitely see this team doing that, because like I said, they should play situationally very smart, but it could be their slaying, at least their consistent slaying, that could hold them back from being truly elite in the respawns. Again, I think they're going to be a good respawn team, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're going to be a bad slaying team. I'm saying I don't think they're quite as good as some of the other top tier slaying teams, and it could hold them back from elite status, but still could make them a very good team. So I have no doubts that probably across all the modes, I can see them being a top 5 team in all modes, but maybe not a top 2 team in any mode, if that makes sense. Just, good at all of them, but not really elite at any of them. Now, I did want to touch on really quickly the question of roles, because I understand this team could have some questions with roles, especially when it comes to if they had to pull out a third SMG, how would that go? And I think now that we see how the game plays, of course, like I said, we don't know what's going to be GA'd and what attachments might come out, but it seems like the AR is a strong weapon this year. I think ARs are definitely a little more blessed than SMGs right now. So in that sense, I think for the most part, you will see 2 ARs. However, there certainly will be situations, especially on some of the very small maps we have in respawns with super hectic hardpoint hills, where you're going to have to see 3 SMGs. And it's going to be Crim6 pulling it out. It's not going to be Clay. And he certainly is good enough to do it. I just don't think he's going to want to do that consistently. I think he definitely belongs on an AR, especially with the strong ARs in this game. So he can do it. I'd like to not see him do it as much, but he certainly will have to do it at times, and I think he'll do okay. He obviously, among the flexes in the league, would not be my first choice for who I would want to swap over to an SMG role, but he can still do it. So I'm not too worried there, but it is definitely something to keep an eye on. And then finally, I just want to touch on where I see this team fitting into the sort of the hierarchy in the CDL. So I think we have our favorites. I think that has to be FaZe. They're looking great in the preseason, and they're the defending champions. We have Toronto. They were the second best team from last year, and their team stuck, so they're obviously a very good team. And then New York kind of is in a mosh pit with me. I think right now I would probably slot New York in my power rankings as the number 4 team, behind Atlanta, behind Toronto, and behind Optic, but I certainly think they're actually very close with Optic. Those 2 teams, in my opinion, are like alone in the second tier. If you want to call FaZe and Toronto the first tier, I think New York and Optic are the second tier, and then maybe the LA teams behind them in the third tier. But for right now, New York and Optic, they're kind of a toss-up for me. One of them, I think, is a top 3 team. So like I said, New York, they're going to be a very good team. I think their floor is very high because of Crim and Clay. They're never going to be, really, in my opinion, in a terrible team. And then their ceiling is high because of Neptune and Hydra because of their talent. So they have a good recipe for success, a good blend of both talent and in-game leaders and Call of Duty smarts, and all of that should lead to this team being consistent contenders over the course of the year. They're always, in my opinion, going to be in that top 5 range, and they certainly have the upside to be a team that wins championships. So we could see some trophies going to New York this year. I think it's certainly a possibility. They're looking sharp so far. That's going to do it for the video. If you enjoyed, let me know by leaving a like down below, and leave a comment as well with your thoughts on the New York Subliners as we approach the Vanguard season. And also subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these breakdowns and other CDL videos from me in the future. I appreciate all of your support on these videos so very much. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you have a good day today, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.